So we're going to start with innovative tools. Xiaopen Chen has come down from Penn State University, drove down this morning and his team at Penn State got the Google Artificial Intelligence Impacts Challenge grant. He's been committed to open science and has a real expertise in this emerging field of AI and machine learning, et cetera. So thank you, Xiaopen, and we will look forward to your talk.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill, for the invitation. I'm so inspired to be here and hear that our secretaries were able to explain very complex topics in simple terms to their grandmas. And I will now try to explain to my grandma what artificial intelligence and machine learning mean. Grandma, you'd be so proud of me. Can we advance our slide? Yes. So I will talk about machine learning and differentiable modeling or physics-informed machine learning for geosciences in general. So I will try to stay on the high level, so I skip some of the little details, including our code and all that. Let me go. So a little bit about me. I got my PhD from Michigan State. I did a postdoc at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. I'm an associate editor at Water Resources Research. I really grew up as a process-based modeler, so I'm very familiar with solving partial differential equations, describing all the processes, and only around 2016 that I got into machine learning. At that time, when you go into like an Earth system modeling community, you will see something like this, okay? So there are myriad processes that overlaid on top of each other. And these process-based models are very useful, right? They serve as tools to test hypotheses, to explain theories, to communicate with the stakeholders. However, at the time, I feel like there are some challenges that started to emerge. For example, these tools are increasing, they're increasing in their complexity. In fact, everyone is adding a little bit of module to them, to these tools, and soon enough, you have too many modules that are very difficult for you to diagnose where the errors are. And it's difficult to evolve these models very rapidly because you have to pose a hypothesis why something is wrong and then correct it, and that takes years, right? Then these models have problematic assumptions in them that some guy wrote an equation 20 years ago and we never looked back. So we need opportunities to re-examine these equations. And it's influenced by human biases as well. Some guy did a study where they queried 1,000 hydrologic modeling papers and why did they choose the model they did. And 75% of the time, people said, we chose this model because my advisor used this model. So apparently some human biases are baked into these tools. So now this is when I start to look at deep learning, which I would not go into too many details here, but it's essentially neural networks, deep neural networks that are able to automatically extract features from data. And we're looking at predicting some variables y using some input x and some attribute a. And a very popular structure that evolved in recent years in hydrology is a model called LSTM. Okay, so for this type of models, we have atmospheric forcing data that is X. Optionally, you can provide some land surface model solutions, and you can provide this with attributes such as soil texture, landscape, et cetera, You throw into one model. This is essentially a self-learned memory system. It learns to keep some information longer and throw away a lot of information. As I walk into the building, I have to discard 99% of the information that goes into my eyes, otherwise my brain's gonna explode, right? So learning to throw away information is also important. But of course, we have so many good people here. When I lay up my eyes on them, I keep more information, right? They all learned that behaviors. So that model outputs some stuff that doesn't have any meaning until you train it with respect to some actual observations, such as soil moisture, such as stream flow, such as water quality indicators. And back then, it struck me as an opportunity to kind of start anew, right? Because this model is free from any assumptions. This same model can be used to do audio analysis, handwriting recognition, all kinds of different tasks. But we can similarly apply in hydrologic predictions and water quality predictions. So I think it's a chance for us to start anew and examine where you could be given the information that you have. Okay, so so in 2017, we had our first paper that uses LSTM to predict soil moisture. And this is some soil moisture measured by the satellite. And we can see that, you know, in those pictures, you know, if I could bother you a second with the details, we can see that the blue line, which is LSTM solution, goes through the red dots almost exactly for a top-performing pixel. And for a medium-performing pixel, we're looking at capturing most of the variations while missing some peaks. And all over the United States, and this is why you want to have big data. These machine learning algorithms, they want to have big data. The bigger the data, the merrier it is. Over the entire United States, we got a correlation of higher than 0.8, so the higher the better, right? And it didn't do too very well in Northeast, and I'm very happy that it didn't, because that satellite has limitation in the Northeast. You're not supposed to do well. I'd be very concerned if it did well here. Luckily, it did not. So at the time, we started looking at rainfall runoff processes. So, other people in the community started also looking at predicting rainfall runoff. What does that mean? That is basically predicting floods and droughts, right? So when we look at this figure, which is a summary of all the performance over lots of basins over the United States, and you see a map here. These are the basins. So on this plot, the more close to the right, the better. And we see that a black curve here is a traditional model that is called SAXMA. It is operationally used for flood forecasting. And if you read off the median, you read off the 50th percentile, and you go laterally down, and you read the x-axis, it gets a median value of about 0.62. This is pretty much where the models were at. You know, some models a little bit higher, some models a little bit lower. The traditional models, we're all fighting here. You know, we don't know where the limit is. But when in 2020-ish, when machine learning comes along, that is this blue line, okay? The blue line is 0.74. And it's actually dramatically improved from the traditional model. So we now know that we've been fighting here, but the ceiling is all the way over there. So apparently, there's a lot of room for improvement in that space, right? So we later did that we can actually use machine learning to do data simulation rather effortlessly. That's the red curve that you get. That's a 0.86 for 1 day ahead prediction. And that's actually kind of ridiculously high. And actually, very relevant to this summit, you can use this tool, same tool, to model water quality at very high accuracy. You know, so what I'm showing you here are some of the papers from our collaboration. We look at dissolved oxygen, we looked at nitrate, we look at water temperature, and LSTM was, once you train it with the continental scale data, you get very high performances. Look at the time series above. When I was a grad student, I used some other tools to simulate this. I wouldn't mention which, but my memory is that we're happy if we get a positive in SE, you know. But here you get to 0.75 and you see the dots falling right on the curves, which are very encouraging. So for a lot of these water quality indicators, the machine learning represent a realistic opportunity to improve our predictability. And by the way, it's also much easier to drive so that we can offer the same information to the public at much lower cost. So, okay, now we see that these machine learning tools are like these bloodless robots. They just do a darn good job at what they do, right? So all over the scientific domains, not just in environmental science, but physics, chemistry, what, you name it, it's chasing human modelers all over the places. But we still feel like something is missing, right? As scientists, we feel like the machine learning models don't explain what they did, and they can't really tell us how to improve our understanding. So we feel like we need something in between. We need hybrids that have a human mind and probably mechanical parts that let you rival the might of the robots. Okay, so, but if you think about it on a deeper level, what is the similarity and differences between machine learning and the process-based models? If you get educated from different domains, you would think they're kind of very different breeds, spacecraft and knights. They don't show up in the same movie. But if you look at it at the underneath, at the core level, they can be written in very similar fashion. You have some inputs to a model that is characterized by some parameters or weights, and then you train those weights or you calibrate those parameters so that your prediction fit the observations better, right? So we've been doing that for a very long time with our process-based models. We've been doing calibration for a very long time. So what is the difference here? I'm going to answer that question myself. So for machine learning, we can actually train a very high-dimensional number of weights. You know, the LSTM that we used to train, or transformer, you have about 500,000 weights. Okay, or you know, if you talk about ChatGPT, it's aiming at modeling our brain, right? So it has 1 trillion weights. Okay, and actually Google just said they're about to publish an AI that has 56 trillion weights. That's about the number of neurons in our brain, right? How about process-based models? We know that we can calibrate a glorious number of 12 parameters, and that's considered high-dimensional, right? So that scale really leads to qualitative different outcomes, because once you have that many parameters you can tune, you can model anything from brain to, you know, the world. So, you know, this is what the AI community has perfected in the last decade. This is called differentiable programming. That allows them to train so many weights. What does that mean? I will spare you of the equations that you see on the screen. Basically, it's the ability to rapidly compute gradients, allowing you to actually pass the gradients back, so you can train a lot of weights. Okay, you can also do the same, achieve the same thing using automatic differentiation offered by these machine learning platforms or the adjoint state methods. Okay, so I will not get into the details here, but we are trying to leverage the fundamental technology that's powering machine learning and combine it with the process-based models. Okay, so here, what we can see is on this upper panel in the middle, what we're trying to do is we're actually feeding the output of a neural network to a process-based model. So what is the output of the neural network? It's like the parameters that the process-based model need. Okay, so this neural network learn to predict parameters so that it can drive these process-based models that output something else, and they get trained. Essentially, the neural networks now serves as the brain. It's like the people who's controlling the puppet, which is the process-based model, right? So this is a novel construct that allows us to seamlessly connect neural networks with our process-based priors. And we find that once you know how to tap into this fundamental technology, you don't have to perceive machine learning as sort of a fixed set of mindset, a fixed set of algorithms, and actually training some data on some tools. That's not the case. You have actually deeper levels to go. Actually, once you do this, we find so many interesting things. One is that we can get to the best performance as before. However, it scales much more efficiently than before. And you know, long story short here, we've tried to give the training algorithms more data and see how it responds. A traditional algorithm would not respond because, you know, it's like fixing houses, and the traditional algorithm would fix every house one by one. So it's like I went to a house, I learned the floor map, learned how I can fix it, then I go into another house, I completely wipe my memory clean, I relearn the whole process. But why would you do that, right? The machine learning approach would be trying to train a technician that serves all the houses. So there's a lot of commonality and synergy that you can have. So that's what we're tapping into by this combination of machine learning and process-based models. And we find it's orders of magnitude faster. This relates to why I said machine learning can offer you efficiency as well. So the traditional approach would take you 100 processor, run it for 2 to 3 days. Now with the new approach, you need just one glorious GPU and run it for 1 hour. So it's a very, very big difference in terms of our carbon footprint. Okay, so I will spare some of the details. So we actually generalize this, we call this differentiable modeling, where machine learning is organically meshed with process-based equations. And once you're able to do that, we can mix NN with process-based equations. We can, the process-based equations serve to constrain the learning to an interpretable scope. So typically, when you learn machine learning, why we don't understand it is because you go from X to Y, right? Learn an overall mapping. but there's maybe 20 different processes involved, and you learn when you learn that overall mapping, it's very confusing. Like, we don't understand that. However, what the newer approaches, this combined method allow you to do is to break it down into 10 different pieces, or 20 if you like, and you say, I know 8 of these processes. Okay, I'm gonna fix them using my prior information. But I'm not so sure about these 2 equations. Can you learn those 2 equations or relationships from data? And that's what the neural networks would do. And that allows you to learn something that you can understand because the scope has been narrowed. So we actually followed up with this method. Again, I'm staying on very high levels. We have neural networks that feeds not only parameters to a process-based model. This process-based model, we actually translate it and write it in PyTorch, which is a machine learning platform that allows us to upgrade its internal functions as well as how it's structured, and with the guidance of big data. And that says that what is actually very interesting results. So when you're looking at this panel, once again, the CDF, the more toward the left, the right, the better, right? So the traditional model is still that black line that gets stuck there for about 0.6 or ish. And when you actually just tune the parameters using our new approach, you get that red line, which is about 0.64. Now the green line is still, the LSTM is still the big guy in town, so it's very hard to defeat it. It's very hard to defeat it. But I want you to focus on that purple line. This purple line is a hybrid differentiable model that combines neural networks with physically based models. So this is very great because it achieves almost the same performance as your machine learning models. But wait, you have so many other advantages that we can offer material benefit to the stakeholders. One is that we can output other variables. This is a problem with machine learning. You can only train it on extensively observed variables. What about the things that we care about that you cannot observe that frequently? Now, this method allows you to print those out so you can explain to your stakeholders, what this is the process, right? And you can, so for example, we compared base flow and vapor transpiration, which are not trained with results, with the observations, and they match reasonably well. And it helps us answer questions. Oops, it's a little bit mixed up here. So it helps us answer questions that are not possible before. So we can now use such a kind of differentiable modeling, this hybrid physics-informed machine learning, to run global hydrologic models and global, I suppose in the future, water quality models as well, and to give you highly accurate simulations, spatial extrapolation, good spatial extrapolation, good coverage of extremes, and learning robust functions. And these are basically evidence of some of the facts that I've mentioned, but I would like to proceed further to one thing that is somewhat interesting. This is to show that you can actually better capture the extremes using this method. But I want you to show you one thing that is, now you have a machine learning that's mixed with neural networks. We can actually learn unknown relationships. We replaced one of the equations with a neural network and learned it and trained it and trying to ask what should be the relationship here. And turns out that the blue line is the theoretical curve. It's pretty smooth and doesn't curve up until 0.7. And the red dots and the black lines are what the neural networks learn. And so what it says that the data actually want to curve up way earlier than this blue line, and it wants to behave like a thresholded system, which we expect the system to be. Okay. So you can also apply this to ecosystem modeling. Again, I'm trying to skip forward. You can also use it to correct the forcing conditions. So it's a very versatile framework that allows us to answer questions without getting bogged down by some of the details of machine learning. So with that, I would like to stop and give other speakers enough time. Yeah, thank you.